Let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and it's an exciting episode. We're going to do like our first deep dive, if you will, of the free agency pool, draft targets. It seems fitting with it being the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, all of that sort of buzz. And, you also have to roll in, of course, the trade market. So we're going to roll in some trade targets, free agency, and some draft targets. The whole shebang. Before we dive into any of that, make sure you hit that subscribe button for MHRT Network over there on YouTube. One of the goals that I've been trying to push is to get MHRT Network to 2,000 by the end of 2025. As you guys can tell, we have a couple guests in the stream tonight, and they are from one location, predominantly orange. You have over here on the bottom left, Caden Staub over here on the bottom left, and it was Lou who called it. He has Garrett Bowles behind him. He's got the brick wall behind him.
Oh yeah.
And you have Lou Scataglia. I was going to try my best to not play Trevor Siemian's interception that he threw to Janoris Jenkins. But I thought better, considering how much you love Trevor Siemian, you adore that quarterback. So I kind of thought on better judgment that we at least get off to the right foot. So welcome, gentlemen, and Kaden. Actually, this is your first time on Manely Broncos, and for Lou, this is your I think second time. Like the first time you were on, we were doing a big old party,
big old mock draft years ago. Yeah,
big old party. So,
absolutely. I forgot you said pitter patter. Let's get at her. That was a pleasant surprise when you started the show.
Yep, it's now become trademark is a really wrong word, because if I say trademark, Letterkenny's going to come after me.
Yeah, don't
Caden, how are you doing, man? You doing good?
Yeah, doing good. How's everyone else going tonight?
Doing good. We're getting ready for more snow tomorrow.
Lovely.
Yeah. It's warmed up out here in Kansas. We've been in the 50s and low 60s all week. It's supposed to start cooling down our way.
Brandon, as you can tell, he's the mainstay of this group. Brandon, how are you doing up there? By the way, I never got a chance to acknowledge. I appreciate the backdrop of Sir Bo Nix in the background.
It's been my backdrop for like months. Where you been? Doing well. Just kind of getting tired of having to scrape my car every time I want to go anywhere. But I live in Colorado, so small price to pay.
Yeah, and it's not just us. I mean, and it's not just us either. Like, Lou, I'm sure you had to deal with it on the East Coast, like the freezer warning over there.
Yeah, last week we were like in the negatives, and then right as all that settled down, a main pipe burst on my street, so I had to deal with a water situation a few days ago. So that wasn't fun, but it's getting warm here, which is pretty neat. But yeah, being on the East Coast, it is going on 10 p.m. my time, and I like my early bedtime, but I made a special exception to come on Manely Broncos. So
that's right.
I am sound asleep at 9:41, so you should feel thankful, Cam, that I made the adventure down to my computer desk to be here.
You had a couple glasses of coffee just to kind of get you ready for
a cup of coffee. Yeah.
All right. So which area?
Shot of espresso, like from a shot glass.
Which area do you guys want to look into first? Do you guys prefer to look into the free agency market, or considering the fact that the Shrine Bowl is going to be played tomorrow, the Senior Bowl is obviously practicing right now? Do you want to look at draft prospects? How would you guys want to, obviously chronologically, you have free agency first, like in March, and then
I think we should start there then, honestly. Get the first thing out of the way first.
Definitely.
Well, Caden, you are you are a first time guest, so you will lead us off.
Okay.
Who is your pipe dream free agent? Just lead it off with that. Like the ultimate. Obviously, there's probably a couple, but Who is the pipe
yeah.
dream free agent that you want the Broncos to go after?
Well, so obviously on Twitter, we all have a friend by the name of Zan, and he had made a tweet the other day where he was talking about the player that I'm about to mention, that was going to be my pipe dream, and now he's kind of got me second guessing it because just for reasons that with Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones is, statistically speaking, a top 5 safety that we just got this last year from Miami in free agency. So I thought shoring up our back end with him, I thought that would be a really good pickup for us. Now, Zan obviously has his opinions that he might not be a player that he would want to see for the Broncos, but I just overall, I know on the offensive side, I know that we need some weapons. Obviously, the other pipe dream name would be T. Higgins. I mean, that would be the name that I think if you ask anyone in Broncos country, that's probably what they would say. But no, Javon Holland for me, and I still think, culture fit. I don't want to dive, too far into that. I think Miami's got other issues going on. I don't know if the leadership down there is anywhere near what we have here in Denver. So because of that, I feel like we could bring a guy like Javon in, and I think he would still fit really well. So he would probably still be my number one, if I'm trying to be a little bit outside of the box.
Yeah. It would probably, if what Zan is mentioning is true, it would probably take a good word from Brandon Jones,
right?
To basically say, no, it's okay. I played with Vic Fangio too, but look at me, here I am. I'm under Sean Payton. I've clearly been playing with Vance Joseph. There's no. I was probably frustrated with Vic Fangio, but there's no love lost to possibly play for a new team. So,
well, long story short on this part, though, if you guys remember back last year at the start of free agency, Brandon Jones was he was very, very, very early on for us.
He was. I remember I lost my crap because I was like,
yes,
why Brandon Jones?
Yes. Yeah, because it was a multi-year deal. It wasn't even a 1-year deal. And when you looked at his stats and you went and looked at his play, and we cut Simmons off for obvious cap reasons and whatnot. But then on top of that, it's like you went out and you just paid this guy X amount of money for, an extended period of time. And then he ended up being, like I said at the beginning of this, statistically a top 5 safety in the league. So that to me has just put some of my own personal judgment to the back seat. George Payton and Sean, they know what they're doing here. So I'm just going to trust them.
We send it off to you, Lou. Who is your pipe dream free agent, and why is it Brandon Cooks?
Oh man, I have a Brandon Cooks signed jersey in the man cave right now that is also in a shadow box. So I think Chris Godwin is my number one, simply because I think he can fill that Z role at wide receiver that the Broncos have missed. I don't really put too much stock in the dislocated ankle. I'm not a doctor, but as far as I understand, if something's dislocated, that doesn't mean that it's broken. So it kind of just has to be located again. So I say that to say that I don't really think he'll lose a step. And given that the Broncos have been really good with managing and preventing injuries, I kind of look at Chris Godwin as like, all right, well, would I want to take, a 2-year deal, that has a lot of incentives to go play in a place like Denver where I'll get, 10, 11 targets a game. Because obviously you have Sutton as your X and you have Mims as your kind of gadget guy out of the backfield. Godwin fills that remaining zero pretty well. I would also really love to see the Broncos just throw a truckload of money at an inside linebacker. Ernest Jones IV, Zach Bond, Jamie and Sherwood, Dre Greenlaw, somebody. We've all kind of talked about this, Caden, that we kind of need more of an enforcer at inside linebacker. And you look at all the elite defenses in the NFL. What do they all have? They have at least one ridiculous cracked out linebacker, right? The Chiefs have Nick Bolton. The Eagles have Zach Bond. The Lions, they got injured, but they had Alex Anzalone, so on and so forth. So it was a position, I think, for a while, maybe didn't seem as valuable, but then when you take a deep dive, it's like, oh crap, the Ravens have Roquan Smith, and even the Steelers. I know Patrick Queen isn't like uber elite, but he's very good.
Yeah.
So I would really love to see us just throw like $15 million per year at like a Zach Bond. If we could pry him from the Eagles, him or Chris Godwin, I think would be pretty cool, because you also get immediate production as well, which is something that the Broncos desperately need at those two positions.
If I'm not mistaken, this is like one of the other times where, and granted, I don't think they're going to be having the exact same thing happen, when they lost Jonathan Gannon, but the linebackers when Gannon left was like both those linebackers were on a contract year. And I think the same thing is true for the Eagles. I think Oren Burks is a free agent, and
he's also a backup, but yeah.
And Bond is also a free agent. So there possibly could be some makeshifting going on with the Philadelphia.
Because Nakobe Dean got hurt, and I think it was a pretty sick injury. So
yeah. Brandon, obviously, there was maybe Lou mentioned something, that was right up your alley, but that's okay. You could probably say the same thing.
I didn't know we were going to have multiple. When you said Godwin, I was like, hell yeah, my guy's still clear. And then you're just like, no,
I want all of the free agents.
Zach Bond was going to be mine. And there's a reason I chose Zach Bond for this, and because the question was, who is your pipe dream free agent? And
right.
I'm going to be honest, this is a pipe dream. Could we just throw all the money at him and get him? Sure. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would be absolutely floored if the Eagles let this man go at all. They signed
I agree.
A 1 year, $2.5 million deal. And that might be the most valuable free agent signing in recent memory, because he's just been an absolute force for them. I feel like we've been talking for years about how poor our inside linebacking group is. And you got to do something there. Back up the Brinks truck. I don't care whatever it takes to get Bond in here. When you have your leading tackler, Alex Singleton, who's not even that. He's okay for a 31-year-old. He was okay. Then he tore his ACL this year. And you just have to slot in Cody Barton, who apparently Washington fans just hate him. And Justin Sternot, who I'm old enough to remember when we drafted him and he was going to be the Kelsey killer. Yeah, that never happened.
Yeah.
When you have to have those two guys as your main linebackers, off-ball linebackers going throughout the rest of the year, they were our main starters. They were pretty much a liability in every sense of the word. For who they are as depth pieces, like, I wasn't expecting them to be world beaters, but they just proved that shadow of the doubt that like linebacker is still a gigantic need on this defense. Probably one of the biggest needs on this defense, because both of them are horrible. Like, we'll talk about safety. Honestly, we'll talk about safety.
They are.
Safety is going to be another one. And Javon Holland is like the easy name to fill in there for obvious reasons. Katie talked about Cam Bynum's another one. But yeah, Zach Bond's going to be mine. Dude's just been an absolute monster, and good for him. Like, he has earned himself a bag. But he has been absolutely just killing it for the Eagles, and I would like him, please.
Yeah, we'll see if Howie lets him out the door.
Graham mentions
way it's happening, but I would love it.
Graham mentions Zach Bond, and I'm going to take this as a troll, but Big Mike mentions N'Keal Harry. And then Graham follows up and says, let's do what we did in 2014, which was sign star free agents. However, Emmanuel Sanders wasn't exactly a star free agent necessarily in 2014. He became a star.
Yes, he did.
But he wasn't exactly a star. I think it's going to be interesting to see with Zach Bond, like what they do, because when you look specifically at the Broncos and everything that they've made in terms of changes, everything else, like all the coaches that have left, like it's been rather significant, points of weakness for like position wise. And I think that, when you look at Zach Bond specifically, who the Broncos hire at linebacker, for linebacker coach, I think will be really interesting. And the other part of this is, there's obviously the comfortability of, Jim Leonhard, the Wisconsin connection, obviously linebacker, what have you. and Leonard was a safety. But like, if I'm not mistaken, I think Leonard might have been there at Wisconsin when Bond was there. So it's definitely one where I would kind of file away, and specifically if there's that succession plan in place of Leonard going to be the defensive coordinator. Perhaps down the line when Vance Joseph leaves in 2026. I think that's going to be a really interesting one.
Nick Bolton is also technically a free agent, and I would slide him right along in the this is never going to happen camp. But
it's interesting. The three of us, Lou and Kate and I, we were actually having that conversation. I believe it was today.
Yeah, earlier this morning.
Pudgy Nick Bolton.
Yeah.
5'3", 275 pounds. Yeah, I'm good on Nick Bolton.
I think the thing for me is like, if it involves something around like a divisional rival, it's so hard for me to like get on board with like because J.K. Dobbins was another one we were talking about, but it's like, would I be interested in him? Absolutely. It's just one of those things. Like I just don't know if he's leaving the Chargers, regardless of the fact that he's a free agent. I just don't know if he's going to be leaving that situation, and he might. But Bolton probably is going to be the same way, right? Like he's loved it in Kansas City. He's made some key plays down there in Kansas City. He obviously has played well with Spags, and it seems like he and Drew Tranquil are a really good linebacker duo. So it's going to be interesting. And then obviously Willie Gay is the other free agent, if I'm not mistaken, the linebacker from Kansas City. So, yeah, I think for me, it's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily even call it a pipe dream, but since some of them are taken, I'll at least throw in another wide receiver in the mix, and I will say Amari Cooper. I will say Amari Cooper would be one that I would throw in there. And, obviously he was with Buffalo. We know what happened with Buffalo. The trend continues about them, crashing and burning when it matters.
My Josh Allen agenda is still alive.
It is still alive. But, obviously we know that the Broncos very much need a wide receiver, and they need a wide receiver that is either going to be opposite of Courtland Sutton, or depending on how aggressive they are in adding weapons around Bo Nix, maybe you're able to dangle Sutton for some for some capital, and
sign T. Higgins,
and maybe do both of Chris Godwin and Amari Cooper. So I mean, just like there's probably ways that you could be able to do it, I guess, but that's probably the true pipe dream scenario, if you will. But there's obviously, if you go after that, there's probably no bigger pipe dream scenario right now than, well, the trade of Garrett Wilson, right? Like there's no pipe dream of like, are the Broncos actually going to be trading for Garrett Wilson? I think that the one thing that we could probably hang the hat on, if you will, is there's a connection. And I mean, there were already, there were already some connections, if you will, before, in terms of the trade with John Franklin Myers, which was, trading John Franklin Myers for a bag of Lay's chips. I mean, like,
not even,
like so
Cracker Jacks.
Yeah. So that's going to be a very interesting one to follow. Now, I think that where the other position group is, we're talking about, all of it is, running back, Caden, and running back, is one where it's kind of preference at this point. When you look, and wide receiver might actually end up being the same way necessarily with it when it comes to free agency or even the draft. I think if you were to ask me, my preference is probably I would rather go to the draft to get one. But nonetheless, there's some players out there in free agency that might be worth a look in free agency.
Yeah. We've talked about this and predominantly Orange multiple times already, and we went over the names of the free agent running backs that are potentially going to be available, like a guy like Najee Harris, at the start of his name being mentioned, I thought, I just don't know if that's a guy that Denver should prioritize. But then when Lou's presenting, his stats and the amount of games he's missed and so on and so forth, it's like, well, he might be, he might be a guy that you could sign and then plug in as a feature back. But when Sean comes out, now obviously we know with Sean, you take what he gives you, and sometimes he might not be telling the whole truth, but he comes out and he says, well, we're gonna treat it like a committee, and we're not just gonna have that one true guy that we just hand the ball off to, 100 times throughout the season. We're gonna have a multi guy approach to that. And when he tells me that, what I instantly get to thinking is he probably still likes a couple of the guys that we already have. But then on top of that, it sounds to me like he's also going to be aggressive, and that is going to be a reason, whether that be free agent or a trade of some kind or the draft. I know we've all talked about Breece Hall potentially being a trade target, but with Aaron Glenn being hired in New York, with him coming from Detroit and then being able to utilize 2 running backs up there, I would almost say that if any player is going to be dealt from New York, I would say Garrett Wilson might be the one that does get dealt. I would almost say Breece Hall is probably completely off the table now with the fact that they hired Aaron Glenn. Because when you look at Detroit with Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs, I mean, I just think he's going to take that same philosophy there, and I don't think he's going to want to get rid of a guy like Breece Hall.
Not to mention he's a defensive-minded. Not to mention he's a defensive-minded coach, and we know that one of the biggest things about when you're a really solid defense is you also want a really good running game. And
definitely.
And so the fact that you have Breece Hall and Braylon Allen,
yes,
probably 2 of the better young duos, if you will, in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how on the table is Breece Hall.
Definitely.
What about you, Lou, in terms of when you look strictly at that running back position?
So I was on, believe it or not, and I know some people in Broncos country feel some type of way about Najee Harris. I was on the Najee Harris train for the right price, but now even over the past couple of days, I'm kind of changing my tune. Can I interest you in Aaron Jones for $6 million for 1 year? I think the answer there is yes. He played for the Vikings last year. He rushed for well over 1,000 yards, averaged 4.5 yards per carry, was running behind a pretty shaky interior offensive line in Minnesota. He can catch passes. He's smaller, but that's never really hurt him in the NFL because he's been very, very productive. And when you specifically look at Aaron Jones and you look at the timing of it all, you get Aaron Jones on a 1-year deal, and then in the 3rd round of the draft, you grab some 3rd round running back prospect, right? So I think you kind of set the table to kind of have who is it, Caden?
Devin Neal out of Kansas.
Sure, yeah. I was just thinking Devin Neal.
He has to be a Bronco. That's all there is to it.
But just think about it. All right, Aaron Jones for a year for $6 million. You kind of set the runway to say goodbye to Aaron Jones after a year, and then all of a sudden you have a year 2 Devin Neal who has 50 carries of tread on the tires. You then have a 3rd-year Estime. Jaleel McLaughlin probably factors into this. I'm actually really intrigued by the possibility of Aaron Jones for a year to get the run game in a competent spot, groom a rookie running back, because Estime, I think, still was only 21 years old. So,
yeah,
yeah, he's very young.
And age-wise, Aaron Jones isn't going to carry the ball 320 times a year anymore. With Peyton's comments that he wants to do more of a committee approach, well, if you gave Aaron Jones 180, 190 carries a year, wouldn't that make a lot of sense given his age and the talent that the Broncos might have in Estime and Jaleel and then a rookie in Devin Neal? So I'm kind of really buying into the idea of a 1-year high-end guy like Aaron Jones. No real major injury concerns either. I'm actually kind of out on Najee Harris at this point. I know I was actually a big proponent of him for 3 years, for $8-9 million a year, and then I'm like, you know what, Najee Harris actually kind of stinks. So I will retract my statements, and I am now an Aaron Jones believer.
Real real quick on that though, on the Najee part, I think before, like if he was in last year's free agent class, I think you probably could have afforded him. But now I think there's such an emphasis being put on the running backs that I think because he might be the youngest and kind of the best available,
overpaid.
he's gonna get someone's gonna overpay him.
$12 million a year.
Yeah, and I don't want that to be us. If we're given that kind of money, I'd rather have Saquon Barkley, which isn't available. So I agree.
Probably offered Josh Jacobs that much last year, but he didn't want to sign with us.
Right.
I don't know though. Najee Harris and Saquon Barkley seem to be the same player. So
subtweet.
But no, yeah. I just the thing for me with Najee has always been kind of like the tread in the tires, and I know that like one of the reasons why it's actually gotten better in Pittsburgh is because of the addition of Jaylen Warren. You know, and the fact that they've added Jaylen Warren to the mix. Has softened it a little bit in terms of, you know, Pittsburgh and, you know, with Harris, but I'm very curious, you know, to see how it all shakes out. I think there's no doubt Harris is a fit. But you know, we all know that like the importance of the way this season's gone, they need a running back one per se. Like they need a guy that they can pretty clearly rely on. And I think what's interesting is, you know, the Aaron Jones point. I think what's funny is when you look at his career, he earned running back one touches, but when he was explosive, like super explosive in Green Bay, it was a running back by committee, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a running back by committee. Like it was between, there was a third back in there, but it was between he and AJ Dillon for a little bit. But like,
was it Lacey?
Maybe Lacey Lacey at the
I thought it was Lacey at the tail end, but I could be off a year there.
I think you're way off, my guy, but that's okay. I'm looking now.
That could be.
So, you're thinking of Jamal Williams.
Yeah, that's who it is.
There you go. There you go.
The 2019 Packers, Aaron Jones carried the ball 236 times for 1,084 yards, 16 touchdowns. Jamal Williams had just over 100 carries. For 460 yards. So I think we're looking for a similar split in Denver if I was just kind of spitballing, and I think Aaron Jones can do that.
Well, and that's why I think it's so interesting because like you look at Jones in Green Bay, like he was effective, he was decisive, like, you know, obviously he was younger too, but you know, all of us wish we were young at some point again.
I'm
I don't know. Aaron Jones pick yourself. That idea.
Yeah. Brandon, what about you?
Yeah. I'm so torn. You know, Aaron Jones, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Aaron Jones. I don't hate it. If you had said Najee Harris, I would have hated it. But I'm just so torn on free agent running back because do I think our need is great enough that I would be okay with it? Like I would accept it. Absolutely. Like we absolutely need so much talent in that room that I think I'd be okay with an Aaron Jones signing, but there's like 15 draftable running backs in this class. Like it's kind of insane.
It's deep.
There's so many. And I just think you can have a dart throw on day 2 and probably hit on a guy that's going to give you like a substantial upgrade in that room on this offense that could be the difference maker for your running game. And like it's deep enough like you can do that twice. I mean there's guys that I haven't even really heard a lot of people mention people like, I mean obviously Cam Scatterbo is a big one, Amari Nance is a big one, Ashton Genty, obviously Caleb Johnson, Dragon Henderson, like those are all kind of big names. But then you still have like Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. Yeah, he's had some injuries. Haven't really heard anything about him. He's a very skilled player. RJ Harvey, UCF. Devin Neal, we've already kind of talked about him. We actually literally spoke to him, I believe, at I don't know exactly where that happened, but someone reported that we actually
Cecil Lammy.
Cecil Lammy was saying that we talked to him at the Senior Bowl.
Was it at the Senior Bowl? Okay.
That's what he made it sound like.
Okay. There's so many good ones.
Yeah.
That Dylan Sampson, Tennessee. So many ridiculous running backs. Like it pains me to think about paying one that's 30
Yes.
in Aaron Jones, but I don't hate it. And we were so bad in the running game that I don't hate it. Like, that's how bad we were. And I already don't like free agent running backs, especially not when we have a class that's like borderline historic. And I still wouldn't hate that.
Yeah. Although they've clearly shown us before that, it doesn't necessarily matter how deep a class is. The Broncos very much could punt on the idea of taking, said player. Like, I obviously we're looking at the Garrett Bowles class, not his class, but the year that they probably should have taken a tackle, they didn't take a tackle, like at all. But
I do have another free agent name that I just want to throw out there.
Javonte Williams,
Nick Chubb,
holding related, not even a running back, but
curveball.
I feel like a lot of times people look at specifically the Bengals organization and they're like, we want T. Higgins, right? I mean, T. Higgins is kind of like the consensus number one. Mike Gesicki is one of them. The consensus kind of like number one. We want this guy. This is the top free agent in this entire free agent class, not even just a wide receiver. But I do think there's another name from the Bengals that is pretty much going to be swept under the rug. Like, he's not a big name, big free agent signing, but with DJ Jones being a free agent, and you're kind of losing that.
BJ Hill.
BJ Hill from the Bengals.
Love BJ Hill.
Is a guy that I would love to see kind of be that underrated, low-key, not sexy signing that just makes a big impact on this defensive line. Because I already talked about, obviously, DJ Jones is already a free agent.
And
Don Franklin Myers is on the last year of his contract. Malcolm Roach is on the last year of his contract, which sucks.
So is Zach Allen.
He'll
be extended.
Zach Allen's going to be extended.
Yeah, he'll be extended.
BJ Hill, I think, can come in and be a solid signing for you. Fill some size that you're losing with DJ Jones.
Yep.
And he's not going to cost you a ton of money.
I agree.
Yeah.
Hill could have a JFM impact as well, because like when that trade happened, gave absolutely nothing for him, and he ended up being,
he had the best year of his career this year.
Yeah. I mean, he played out of his mind.
He was borderline elite this year, just objectively in terms of just the defensive end group in the league. He was borderline elite.
It's interesting because like it seems like I love that comparison because when you look at JFM and the year that he had, he's still very much fit within the in the realm of underrated player with the Broncos, but he had like the best year of his career, which also fell in line with what he had at New York. When he was at New York, like he was one of the best underrated players, on that Jets defense. And then you look at BJ Hill, he's kind of the same way because everybody was all hyped up about DJ Reader and how good DJ Reader is.
Yeah,
I remember the DJ Reader, Chris. That was from times.
We were supposed to sign Reader.
Catch passes from Joe Burrow than
he was the dream. Yeah,
I was like, well, screw you, DJ Reader.
Yeah. But I will be pretty pissed off if all the moves that the Broncos make is extensions to Zach Allen and Nick.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I will.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah,
that happens.
The only thing that scares me is this last year we took obviously the larger of the two hits of Russ's situation, and we still have to take the other portion of that this year. But because of how much cap space they have, I would be incredibly disappointed if we punted another off season and wasted another year under Bo's rookie contract just because we were carrying. I think that is I mean Greg Penner literally came out and said we are going to be aggressive. I don't. That man is not a liar. So I think if he's on in George, hey, I want to win not only the division, but I want to win even further. I think he's going to just say, hey, I'm trusting you guys. The money's there. Just get us the right players.
Yeah. It's
point.
Well, and I just think that, that's one of the underrated, things that people maybe not necessarily focused on. And that is just the the symbiotic relationship and close-knit relationship that this ownership group has with George Payton and Sean Payton now. And so the fact that when they're saying aggressive, I think we should expect them to be aggressive. Like
no reason to not be.
And and so I think that that's why I'm actually kind of like expecting also too, like, for them to be aggressive in free agency would also tell us that, okay, if they're going to be aggressive in free agency, also means they're going to be aggressive in the draft. Yes. And I think that for me, when you look at the running back position, like I obviously he was name dropped a little bit, but the best bang for your buck, like running back right now, is probably Nick Chubb in terms of bringing him in, like just like a 1-year deal. And then you can be able to go into the draft and still get your Caleb Johnson, or you can go get your Omarion Hampton, or Travion Henderson, or a back, if you will, in the first like 2 days of the draft. And plus, Alex, he asked a question for you, Lou, but I mean, I think we could all answer it with 2 words: Bo Lowry. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
no kidding. I saw that question. I was going to type him back, but I'm not connected with my YouTube. But yeah, I mean, just on a side note with Bo Lowry, I mean, we have just the injury flip that this franchise has gone under over these last couple years has been night and day. I mean, you can dig up an injury report from the 2022 season in like week 13, and it's like longer than a CVS receipt. And shoot, we're going into week 18. We have like 2 players on the injury report. That's another thing to mention too, especially with injury prone free agents like Dobbins and Chubb. Mm-hmm. Those players and agents absolutely see that certain teams are just better with managing and preventing injuries. So like a J.K. Dobbins, he's been hurt his whole career, but he's very, very, very good. He's a very good running back. I would have to imagine that if the Chargers don't want him back, he would look at the Broncos, and his agency would look at the Broncos and say, well, these guys know how to keep players healthy. For the longevity of their career, it maximizes their earning potential in the NFL. So this isn't just about immediate product of all 22 starters are healthy. It's also like a free agency thing, to where some of these more injury prone free agents who are kind of battling like soft tissue things may be willing to maybe take a bit less if they come to a franchise that they know is going to, rehab them well and treat them well. So I think the Broncos have a really big advantage in that regard heading into the offseason that probably won't get talked about a lot, and obviously isn't like a publicized type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that I think that that's why like the Nick Chubb thing is so fascinating, because like when you look specifically at the Chubb thing, he's been injured his entire career with Cleveland. Now, I think the thing is like it's kind of like the Javonte argument from what we're seeing right now. Like, he's injured, we're not going to certainly touch him because of everything that he's in terms of wanting him back because of those injuries, right? And so sometimes injuries and the injury history and the injury bug carries with you, right? Carries with you. So, but I think that that's where you afford yourself the 1-year deal. But, to your point, Lou, like, it's like when you look at the success of the overall health department, even under Bo Lowry, like, free agents should always look at that. And it's not just even like the injury riddled free agents. It's even the ones that are the prize free agents. Like, it should always be about taking care of your body, taking care of your long-term health. And it's also pretty evident that the ownership group and the overall team, like, I think it's pretty obvious that they are making a well-known commitment to their players and to the actual, foundation of the team. So it's pretty safe to say that they are wanting the best possible, team out there on the field. Now, I think for me still, like on the running back, just real quick, my preference is probably draft 2. Just having that young nucleus in terms of just overall with that room. And, you could build a younger nucleus. And I think that, when you look at it, everybody's going to be talking about Ashton Genty, of course, and rightfully so. But, there's others, of course, as we mentioned. Do you guys want to dive now into the draft now a little bit? You guys want to talk about the draft?
Sure, let's do it.
Quick thing I just wanted to mention with Nick Chubb, and I thought you were going to actually bring this up, Ken, when you talked about Javonte. I love Nick Chubb. I would be way more on the Aaron Jones train than Nick Chubb.
Oh,
Nick Chubb had a very similar kind of knee injury that he saw Javonte go through, and we know what that did to Javonte's explosiveness and skill as a player. So that scares me. Very, very similar injury. So I'm totally out on Nick Chubb, but I do agree with both of your takes about Bo Lowry and the impact that he's had on this organization. I absolutely think that free agents should and are paying attention to that sort of thing. I mean, their body is literally their career, right? I mean, there's injury guarantees and everything, but you stay healthy, you're going to make the most money. Like that's literally how it works in this league. And that has to be something that they look at. So couldn't agree more there, but I am all out on Nick Chubb, unfortunately.
Yeah. Full disclosure, like I have Aaron Jones, I have, possibly even Najee Harris. I have like other options ahead of him in free agency, because of that health reason, right? Like, I mean, I'm just like, when you look at it, just overall, the overall bang for your buck, if you will, and getting him and then, still drafting, a guy or maybe even another player, if you will, because of the injury history. I just think that it's one where I'm not kind of like ruling it out, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not really like the injury prone thing to me. It's more just like I don't know if he's going to be the same player.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened? But anyway.
Right.
Paul says, "Do we have Greek?" Well, we just mentioned his name. It is Bo Lowry. That is basically.
Greek has been gone for a little bit.
And Greek has been gone for just
years,
a little bit,
right?
Yeah, I think he left a couple years ago. Let's turn to the draft a little bit. This is a bit of a talking point, and it's not a matter of the fact that we hate the players of Malachi Starks or Nick Imwari. They're great players. Great players. It's just I just think if you were to ask everybody's intention for what they want to do in this draft, it would be to get those weapons around Bo Nix, at least on day one, and then you can look at that defensive line. Because I think what's interesting for me, Caden, is the defensive line group is deep, right? The defensive line group is deep this year in this class.
Yes,
the meat and bones of the offensive playmakers is certainly in day 2 and day 3. I think we agree there. Right there. But still, I think that when you look at the day one, why not still go out and get your playmaker? And then when you finally have recouped the fact about day 2 picks, why not get a defensive lineman on day 2? Why not pour some assets into there? So I don't hate the idea of a defensive lineman, certainly with the first round pick, but I just like the idea of an offensive playmaker more with the first round.
Well, and Cam, I agree. I don't know. I mean, just scrolling through X and going through our chats every day, I don't see a lot of Broncos country that disagrees with that take. I think we've all honed in on one of the next few players I'm going to mention. I mean, Emeka Mbuka from Ohio State, Tyler Warren from Michigan, Ashton Genty out of Boise State, Colston Loveland out of Michigan. I mean, Luther Burden, Missouri. I mean, the list of offensive talent that you are going to have these top 20-ish, top 18-ish picks. I mean, it's so when you look back at some of these, previous drafts, whether it's Justin Jefferson, whether it's Chris Olave, whether it's, the draft that we took Judy in, and then Lamb went just a few picks later to Dallas. I mean, when you look at these drafts and you look at some of the wide receivers, and even tight ends just this last year with Brock Bowers, when you're looking at some of these weapons, I think it's such a glaring weakness with our offense. How many? I mean, and I know, some people say that this isn't all on the receiver. Sometimes it's just a bad pass. But if I remember right, Bo was like top 3, top 5 in drop passes this year. And that is just something that I have been that just keeps me up at night, for lack of a better term, is because how many times did Bo have a perfect pass that hit guys right in the hands and it just dropped, and we're not taught, and Sutton, and not even to call Sutton out, but Sutton had some
No, let's
bad
call him
drops
out.
this
He
year.
has drops when he shouldn't have, and then he'll make the most ridiculous catch the next play.
Yes, and then Franklin. Now Franklin was a rookie, but him and Bo connected at Oregon way more. But anyway, I mean, just focusing back to the draft, Ibuka and Warren. I mean, I think Genty's going to go way higher. I think he's almost dang near a lock for a top 10 pick, if not a top 12 pick, because Dallas is right there. That just screams Ezekiel Elliott 2.0 to me with Jerry Jones. Like they need a running back. Probably not as bad as some other positions, but they do. I think he's going to go way before we ever even in the realm. But I was looking on Pro Football Network today when I was doing some mocks, and they've had Ibuka. He was at the 17th overall, and now he's dropped to 27th overall. Now, I know this is just a mock. I know this is just a mock, but I mean, if we get closer to draft time and his stock has potentially fallen, if he's sitting there at 20 and we don't have to give any additional resources to get him, to me, he just seems like a Sean Payton guy through and through. And the same thing with Tyler Warren. I mean, I think that truly is just a coin toss, and whichever one you pick, I think you're going to be happy with.
What about you, Lou?
Yeah, so I think the Broncos, of the three position groups on offense, playmakers, I actually think tight end is the one that's most dire. So I think if you get a viable receiving tight end in the building, that's going to make life a lot easier for Sutton and Mims and Franklin and Vele. That also could help expand the running game a little bit. So I would almost say that ideally, if Loveland or Warren is there at 20, you pick them, but I'm like falling in love with the idea of Emeka Egbuka at 20 because I think he fills that Z role that the Broncos are missing in the same mold that a Garrett Wilson would. But then I also go back to, okay, well, some people in the know in Broncos country have kind of alluded to the fact that Juwan Johnson, a free agent tight end from the Saints, could make his way to Denver. So then let's say we sign Juwan Johnson. Then it's like, okay, maybe a first-round tight end is off the board. And then Ashton Genty goes before pick 20. So that kind of leaves you with, all right, well, do you take a receiver? Do you take Egbuka, Burden? I've read things that have said that the draft is really rich in that like 25 to 70 range. Do you accept a trade back and maybe, get a running back, like get a Hampton or a Caleb Johnson? I mean, there are so many different avenues that the Broncos can go in the draft, and a lot of it depends on what they do in free agency, and even if they explore a player trade. I don't even think a defensive tackle in the first round is out of the realm of possibility. I would even love to see an inside linebacker at pick 20 as well, because I just think the Broncos have a need there. But again, you can find an inside linebacker in free agency, Ernest Jones or Dre Greenlaw. My best fit, though, just to narrow it down to one player, is probably Emeka Egbuka, just because he can block, decent size, good hands, can run routes. He's that Z guy that we're missing. Again, in the same mold of someone like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, maybe even Jackson Smith and Jigba, just the Ohio State boys. And we all know that Sean Payton had very good luck with a certain Ohio State wide receiver whose name rhymes with Bike Obamas for all those years. Does he want to try his luck again on Emeka Egbuka? Maybe, but I think if we don't get a playmaker, it would be cool to see defensive tackle or inside linebacker. Or if you're Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah, you think we need a first round safety, but that's whatever.
And go ahead, Caden. You're muted, it looks like.
Real quick on this. Yeah. So if you guys rewind the clocks back to when we had the 9th overall pick and Justin Fields was sitting there.
Yeah.
And Mac Jones was sitting there, and then just completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
Goodell goes to the podium, and it's Pat Surtain the second,
that.
Yeah. So hear me out here. I think Broncos country would be pissed initially, but I think 3 years in the future, I think you would be, oh my God, yeah, that was such a smart pick. But Jalen Walker as an inside linebacker, I think I see so much elite talent out of that kid.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I think he's going to be there at 20. I don't with all the players available in the first round, I don't think there's any way that we can potentially mess this pick up. But that is a guy that I think on draft night you're like, really? We took an in. I mean, Abuka was sitting there and we took an inside. Are you kidding me? But I think in 3 years you'd be like, holy cow, he was exactly what we needed. So that is like my dark horse type of a pick that I think Broncos country would be upset. But on the same flip of the coin, I think a lot of people that might look at him sooner would be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
I have a similar guy in Jahdae Barron, who would be a what the hell is this pick in real time from pretty much everyone.
Like a Brian Branch type. He can play everywhere.
He's Brian Branch. Yes. He's this draft's Brian Branch. And I mean, a lot of people also look at like, oh, we have Jaquan McMillan. We don't need a guy like that. But, yes, Jaquan has been an absolute, find and a gem for us. But he's not perfect. I mean, like, he's cheap and he's a good player. But if you can put a guy like Jahdae Barron in there, like, he's elite. He is an elite defensive back compared to McMillan. And again, I love McMillan, but I think if you can get a top 10 defensive talent in this draft class there at 20, and he could definitely slip because there's a lot of other names that are going to get pushed up. Like Jahdae Barron is in that realm for me of like, everyone probably hate it, but we'd look back and we'd be like, damn, this guy was a boring pick because no one wants to throw at him, so you don't really see anything happen. Exactly. That's my guy there. But
what I was just gonna say real quick to you, I was just gonna say to your point, Brandon, like, you can never have too many corners or just secondary pieces in general. And how upset would we be if you have Barron and McMillan and Riley Moss and Chris Abrams-Drain and Pat Surtain, and then you obviously have addressed probably some of the safety room. Like, we wouldn't be upset at all. Like, we wouldn't be upset at all, at least. Because even at that point, like, the depth of that cornerback room would be so deep at that point, that it like, we would be beyond happy.
We don't want to see that Browns game happen ever again.
Oh,
right, exactly.
Oh, God.
Am I allowed to say Cracker back on stream because we were missing him during that Browns game?
That's my Jackie.
Yeah, that was terrible. That was terrible.
Juan McMillan saved our season.
Yeah, he really did.
Real quick before you continue, Brandon, Alex Smith, no relation to the Alex Smith of the Washington Commanders and
no thanks on P. Ryan.
I think let me phrase it this way. If I was to take Samaje Perine back, I would probably want to take Javonte Williams back, considering that was the role that he was doing, in what is it, the 2024 season. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yes.
But go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Barron is kind of my, like, everyone would hate it at the time, but it would actually be
grow on us.
Good pick that would grow on us guy, which looks like Lance agrees.
Yeah.
Moving Riley Moss inside, that's an interesting idea. The other, though, kind of thing I've been thinking about and sort of coming around on as an idea in this draft class is, like, obviously, we've talked about the need at specifically wide receiver. And I mean, we've also talked pretty extensively already on this episode about Egbuka, and I love him as well. Like, I would be absolutely filled with him at 20. But I think a guy that I'm kind of coming around on that I think we could maybe try to trade down a little bit and still potentially land is Matthew Golden from Texas. He's just not as flashy as really the other top wide receivers. He's just so reliable. Like, I would love trading down, getting some more assets, and still landing a guy like him. He's kind of going to be like just the dependable. Honestly, what you were kind of hoping Courtland Sutton would be, and like, not that Courtland Sutton is not a great wide receiver for us, but like, we've talked about it. Like, he does have, unfortunately, some drop issues.
At the worst time.
That's something that. Go ahead. I mean, that's something that we've also seen like Matthew Golden kind of have a couple issues with, but he's kind of like the level of reliability that we saw from Tim Patrick, right? Just like everything you throw at him, he's going to come down with it. He's just going to be your best friend. And I think when you have a quarterback in Bo Nix who's shown the promise that he has,
you got to get him a best friend.
His rookie year, you got to get him a best friend.
That's a good term to
be
use.
Happy with that being a tight end. I would love that being a tight end. And
do both.
I want to try to I think we absolutely need to invest in tight end in this draft. I don't want to go with that let's just pick this guy because he's like a great athlete and he could maybe be the tight end that we've been wanting for the last ever because it hasn't really worked out any other time. But Golden for me in a trade down, I would be pretty happy with that, or even picking someone up on the defensive line after a trade down.
Well, because I think that the thing for me is if I obviously I'm in favor of Emeka Egbuka. That's been kind of my predictions from day one has been Emeka. But if you love Emeka Egbuka, you're going to love Matthew Golden. There are so many similarities between the two that if you love Egbuka, you're going to love Golden. And there might be a chance because obviously we're sitting here on the end of January. By the end of, February or whatever, when the scouting combine has happened and, et cetera, there could be a possibility where they get lumped together, where you're actually talking, Big Mike mentions, 29 to 32 for Golden. There might be a scenario where they're lumped together. Egbuka is going to be taken at 20 and Golden, will be taken at 21 to Pittsburgh. And I'm just spitballing a scenario, but it's just it's possible that those two get close together. One free agent, obviously, did we get a chance to mention, or we briefly mentioned his name was Mike Gesicki. I would not rule out something like that because, we talk about tight end, right? If they go out and they get tight end, now you're talking about everything's on the table. Running back, wide receiver, true weapons on that. So I think that if they're able to get anything of that nature, I'm all for it, and I think that the wide receiver market is going to be so fascinating. Lance mentions a player with connections to a front office person, and that would be David Shaw. Alec Ayamaner from Stanford. He's an interesting one. He's a big time blocker, and I think that's the other part of it with Egbuka and Golden is they are very, very capable blockers. So
I was sad to hear that Alec opted out of the Senior Bowl because I was wanting to see him.
Speaking of Senior Bowl and obviously tight end, we would probably be remiss if we didn't talk about this tight end room though, and specifically all the stuff that we've been hearing in terms of the Senior Bowl. Some tight ends that might not actually be as fast. Than we certainly were accustomed to seeing for certainly being a record breaker. And that'd be Harold Fannin. The clips that we're seeing, he looks a bit slower than kind of I've
fullback,
been,
baby. Get ready to learn fullback.
But one player in particular, and we would be remiss if we didn't shout out, Jordan because of this. But he went to the U. Eric Arroyo has been. He made him.
Elijah Arroyo.
Elijah, I believe.
Elijah Arroyo. He's made himself a lot of money, at least after the first 2 days. He's made himself a lot of money. So
all player.
Arroyo, Terrence Ferguson, Caden. I know that that's another player that has always been on our radar. But are there certain tight ends, Lou, for you that maybe in this draft class that you're looking at?
I haven't really dove deep into the tight end class specifically. What I know is that it's very deep, and I think it would be cool if the issue with kind of all of the playmaking rooms is that we need to balance finding rookies for the long term with also getting immediate production, and I think that's kind of a fine line. So with the tight end, do you throw all your chips in the middle for the NFL draft and hope that Loveland or Warren or Gunnar Helm or someone else is going to be the starting tight end? He's going to catch 50 passes. Or do you say, all right, let's go sign Jawan Johnson for 2 years and $16 million and then look into the third round. That's kind of how I'm viewing this. I wouldn't say that I have someone in mind at tight end from the Senior Bowl. I have seen that Harold Fannin doesn't seem to be as quite as good as people think.
Yeah.
I've admittedly not been watching a ton of the Senior Bowl, but I do trust some of the so-called experts in the field whenever the rubber meets the road and we're a few weeks from the draft and, you have so-and-so's top 5 prospects. I tend to take their word.
Yeah.
I think we absolutely, tight end specifically, we absolutely have to draft a tight end. Adam Troutman is whatever. He's fine. He can do everything just fine. Lucas Kroll is probably should be bagging groceries at Walmart, and Nate Atkins.
Troutman's kind of tight end too, right? Like that's probably how he would say it. Like
yeah, Troutman is a perfect tight end too. I think no matter how you slice it, like I think we have to get a tight end into the building and let whatever tight end coach we have now that Declan Doyle is gone, whatever tight end coach we have, work with him and try to develop him. I don't think we can, keep playing slap happy the clown with the tight end room because we're seeing more and more that even having a great tight end is becoming a thing among some of the best offenses. Laporta, Kelsey, Goddard, etc. So
Bowers
got to bring in a tight end no matter what.
I would be pretty happy if we double dipped here, not in the draft, but I'm saying we you go in and you sign Mike Gesicki from the Bengals.
Gesicki's a big wide receiver,
go in and draft. Yeah, and you draft someone, whether that's like Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor, Gadsden from Syracuse.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
You gotta put a lot more juice in that room. Invest.
I think what's so fun about this, Caden, is like, you look specifically at the draft. It is like pinpoint accuracy of the Broncos' needs offensively. Running backs,
right.
Tight ends, and wide receivers. What about you for those tight end rooms? Like, you've been studying the Oregon team from top to bottom the moment you wanted Bo Nix.
Yes. I mean, Terrence Ferguson to me, and this is the reason why. And while you guys have been talking, I've been trying to rack my brain and remember back. But I mean, I don't know if Sean Payton is going to utilize a tight end like maybe some of the other offenses do in the NFL right now. I was trying to think to his days down in New Orleans, and his games were always built around his wide receivers and his running back room, and he would have a few of the Swiss Army he could there in the tight end room. But when I'm thinking back to stuff like this, I'm thinking if they're going to draft a guy, like a guy like Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, he's going to have familiarity with Nix. And I'm not saying to go out and just, draft every Oregon Duck because, they know Bo and so on and so forth. But that is why I have still put my flag in the ground on someone like Ibuka for the first round. And then, if they're going to do a tight end at all, maybe they bring in, Juwan Johnson from New Orleans where he's at now, or they go out and they sign a Mike Gesicki. But it just seems to me, at least through these first 2 years with Sean, that he prefers his tight ends to, yes, he wants them to be able to, catch a pass every once in a while, especially if it's in the red zone and he schemes them open. I'm thinking of a couple of Nate Atkins touchdowns this year.
Atkins diet.
Right. But I'm thinking, like a guy like Ferguson and then Troutman. And maybe I'm being pessimistic there. I just don't want to set myself up thinking that we're going to get a guy like Gunnar Helm on day 2, and he's going to be like Brock Bowers for us in this offense next year. Because I just don't know if that's what Sean would envision. And I think that's why I've moved myself more towards the wide receivers and the running backs instead of a tight end. Because these first 2 years he's been here, that has been a position that he just has not attacked at all. And there's been plenty of availability to go out and get guys, and that is just one position we have not addressed.
The one thing I'll push back on a little bit there, just in terms of Sean Payton's usage of the tight end room, is a person by the name of Jimmy Graham. during his time with the Saints.
Yes,
pretty good, huh?
Yeah, that's a good point. That was a trade from Seattle, wasn't it?
It was.
And I think
on the Saints, and then he went to Seattle, but he started
went to Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his first 5 years, pretty much his rookie, were with Seattle.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you, though. I think that it's not a featured staple in the offense, which is why we haven't really seen him try to make the investment there, because this team had needs in other areas. Currently still has needs in other areas that they're going to go after. I think first, like, to me, running back, specifically pass catching running back, I think is a lot more of a staple in the Sean Payton offense. But I do think he's going to want to get something out of that tight end room. I agree that I don't think it's necessarily like the number one thing that he goes after, but he was able to get a lot out of Jimmy Graham, and he was like a big staple of that offense.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, well, one thing is for sure, if they don't address that tight end room, then it means that they believe that Lucas Kroll is in fact the best player on the football team.
Oh no, they'll see me at the facility if they don't address the tight end.
But I think that it's important to also bring up too. It's like Sean Payton mentioned about that joker position, and he mentioned the tight end. But it wasn't just the tight end. Like he mentioned multiple different positions. And I think that, given with where the Broncos were in terms of finishing the season, depending on what they do in this draft, there's a lot of ways where I feel like, there is a possibility here where offensively and everything that could happen, under Davis Webb and, the transition there with the offense and even under Bo Nix, where there might be a situation where they don't have just one joker anymore. Like they have multiple different jokers.
All the jokers.
And so because you saw near the end of it, you saw the uses of Marvin Mims, right? And so I think that, let's just say that they add another wide receiver. I wouldn't put them past them to use a package, of I'm sure we'll talk about him because he's been the elephant in the room in the last 24 to 48 hours. But, using a backfield of Tez Johnson and Marvin Mims, and just getting a little bit creative about how you want to use them. And I think that, the Percy Harvin type usage was a bit before its time. But it is very useful depending on how you want to use a player, of those types of, explosive nature. So obviously I said his name. But the Tez Johnson, playmaker of the world, I would be very fascinated to see how this team would want to use him, regardless of the connection to Bo Nix. There are a lot of players I feel like, that could be, lumped into this. Zay Flowers is obviously probably the cream of the crop example, for a player, that is that, type of player, if you will. But he's an explosive player, and obviously he's got 1v1s, right? In the Senior Bowl, and we know that the 1v1s are more often than not going to be tipping it in the hand of the wide receiver, not necessarily the cornerback. However, you also got to call it for what it is, and he has been looking really good in the Senior Bowl right now.
He's been flat incredible. I was telling you earlier today, I was out, and then I was in, then I was out, then I was in. I am planting my flag right now. I am all in on Tez Johnson.
Now.
It's a pretty light flag. He's 150 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, the size is going to be I'm not telling you it's a concern, but it is a legit talking point when it comes down to decision making. But just watching him, and I went back this afternoon. I went back and I was watching some tape just from this last year at Oregon with Dylan Gabriel. And Tez is so he reminds me, and I mean this in the most polite way possible, but he reminds me of a more mature Jerry Jeudy. He has got that shiftiness right off the line of scrimmage that Jeudy does.
Height is different for sure.
Height is different. Weight's going to be a little different, but just that shiftiness right off of the line of scrimmage. And right now, I just don't know if we've got that guy. I think you could plug if they would not take Ibuka in the first round. I was kind of mentioning this earlier today when we were chatting, but if they didn't take Ibuka in the first round and they could get Johnson on day 2 somewhere and he fit that Z role, I would still be over the moon.
I mean, back in the day, and I know they might be different players, but Sean Payton did use the first round pick on a 5'10", 5-pound receiver, Cooks, who I absolutely adore. So, hey, like, I know Cooks and Tez Johnson are probably a little bit different players, but the idea that Sean Payton might not want a small receiver, I think is probably not true. I know we all get hung up on Marcus Colston and Michael Thomas and all these big body targets, but shoot, I mean, Brandon Cooks is he was a very good player for a very long time. And
do you mind muting yourself there, Lou?
Lou's back. I don't know if Sean Payton would view Brandon Cooks even close to being a similar prospect as Tez Johnson, but just to play devil's advocate, he has prioritized a smaller wide receiver at one point, and it did pay off for him.
And actually, Marvin Mims was getting comparisons to Brandon Cooks. Sorry, he was getting some comparisons to him. So yeah, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. I just think the Tez Johnson thing is just so interesting. I mean, obviously the weight is a concern, and the Tank Dell stuff, I get it, but I think we also have to understand it was a freak injury, like it wasn't anything that was caused by him, it wasn't anything that was caused by him. But the biggest, deter Brandon is that weight, right? It is that weight. But there have been players, regardless of, maybe height differential, there are players that have come into the league, and done quite well for themselves, with a little bit of a lesser weight. Devontae Smith, obviously, there was Zay Flowers, and of course, Tank Dell. Tavon Austin was in the NFL and actually lasted a quite a long deal, if you will, in the NFL. Maybe not necessarily the same as his West Virginia tape, with Geno Smith, legend Geno Smith, but like he still carved himself a rather, decent enough role in the NFL for, I don't know, it was like probably a good 8 years. So it's possible that he could carve himself into a role.
I think Tez Johnson's measurables were concerning. I don't think it's not going to be enough for me to say like, no, I'm totally out on Tez. I already thought he was probably going to be like a later day 2 pick, and this just solidifies that more. You're probably going to get him at an even better value than you were going to get him at before. But like Tez Johnson's not the kind of player that you're saying like, I want him to go out there and be our X every single play, every snap of the game, right? Like that's just not going to happen. That's just not the kind of player that he is. But I do think, I mean, he was borderline unguardable in practice, and I just think that's
you can't teach that.
You can't teach that. No. Like his skill is more than just his like weight. His skill, like the wide receiver position, is more than just weight. And like, yes, he is pretty small. Like even the Brandon Cooks comparison, Brandon Cooks was still probably like 40 pounds heavier than Tez is. Yeah. But I mean, can he put some more pounds on? Sure. Can he put 40 pounds on? I don't think so. I don't know for sure, but maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 more pounds, and we're having a bit of a different conversation. I think he's just going to be a later round guy.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I mean, like, give me him at a value pick, and I'm not even saying that's the only, pick you make at that position, but I just think with his connection to Knicks and what he's shown, and even more than that, like what he's shown so far at the Senior Bowl and also Oregon with 2 different quarterbacks, like he's a good wide receiver.
Yeah.
Just to add to that too, Brandon, that was similar to Troy Franklin last year. He had consistently between like a real late first to second round draft grade on him from a lot of different people that do, cover the draft and these prospects for a living. And I vividly remember talking in the chat, like, how is this guy? I mean, why is he falling as far as he did? And he fell all the way to the 4th round for us. And that's what I was telling Cam and Lou earlier today with Tez Johnson. Is I kind of view him the same with this weight. I think the talent's going to be there, and the talent's going to get him drafted. Don't misunderstand me, but I do think someone's going to look at the size and the weight, and it's going to cause him to be. It's going to cause that urgency to take him. I think that's going to slow up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I do think. Sorry, unfortunately, like the weight thing is going to push him down. Unfortunately, what he's been showing recently in the Senior Bowl practice is probably going to push him up a little bit too. But I think if we're going to get him in, I don't know, round 4, round 5, probably round 4, totally okay with that.
I don't even know if you're going to be able to get him in round 4, but still though, like the weight stuff, like it's going to be concerning no matter what. It's going to be, because like it's kind of like, on the flip side of it, like in baseball, like if you throw 95 miles an hour, you're going to be attracting scouts left and right.
Yeah.
Like if your weight distribution is, 159, 160 some pounds, it's going to turn off some scouts a little bit, but I think that, Lou, I think what is really kind of set off a lot of us in terms of some of the Tez Johnson stuff is like, well, he's so puny of a size that now he's undraftable.
Yeah.
And I think that, and whether that's, just getting a reaction and everything, like, I understand it, but like by that same token, we can't write a guy off just because of the simple fact that he's 5'9", 159 pounds. And while that's still concerning to a degree, if you can play, I think you and I said this too in the chat, like if you can play, you can play. And at least for right now in the Senior Bowl, it's pretty obvious that Franklin
Tez Johnson
Tez
belongs.
Johnson,
If he's a ball player, he's a ball player. I understand that history would tell us that his chances of working out in the NFL are kind of slim, but also, history also tells us, X and then sometimes Y happens. So just because, Tez Johnson might not have a great chance of working out doesn't mean that Tez Johnson himself can't work out. We know that in between the ears is perfect. He is a wonderful human being, and we obviously know the story with the Knicks family. I mean, to be honest with you, like I think at the end of the day, the Broncos probably don't really need a player like Tez Johnson. Like he's not. I don't think he's part of solving the equation. I think he could be a fun addition. I don't think we need to go out of our way to draft Tez Johnson. Some people have even said we should have drafted Bucky Irving instead of Troy Franklin, but maybe the Broncos wanted to do right by Bo Nix and get him a teammate. I think it's a cool story, and it's something that we can kind of milk towards the draft. But, once the rubber meets the road, I think we'll realize that, we need a number 1 tight end more. We need a Z wide receiver more. We need a bell cow running back more. We need an inside linebacker and a bigger defensive tackle and, probably a better safety. I think Tez Johnson could be on the wish list just as like a fun thing. But I think at the end of the day, he's not someone that should be heavily prioritized by the Broncos this offseason.
Well, and it's interesting because like if you were to probably ask like me just point blank between Tez Johnson and Terrence Ferguson, who's the biggest need from Oregon, it's Ferguson, not Tez Johnson.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So some mentions in the chat, we talked about Cortland Sutton as a maybe a trade piece. Well, they may not necessarily need to trade Cortland Sutton in 2025, but what they could do, and we did mention Alec Ayomanor, if you will, but they could draft a rather tall wide receiver, if you will, and one player that Joe Brewer mentions is Jaden Higgins.
Ball player
from Iowa State, and obviously Beck from TCU, who it's a pretty popular comparison, but he's certainly getting some comparisons to former Bronco legend Eric Decker. I think that that is certainly an option. I think that, if the Broncos wanted to, go down that route. And I think that's probably another angle of this wide receiver double dipping that would be fascinating. If you get Egbuka, but you went out and got a 6'3", a player that rather compares a bit favorably to a Cortland Sutton. I think that would kind of tell us that, Sutton's here for 2025, and then they'll maybe figure out whatever, in 2026. So
yeah,
I think that angle is going to be interesting.
And one other thing I do want to just briefly mention, as long as we're talking quickly wide receivers, we talked about Tez Johnson, what he did at the Senior Bowl. The other thing, though, that the Senior Bowl, and in terms of the wide receiver room or position in this draft class, has really solidified to me is, as much as I would still love Egbuka or Golden round one, there are so many guys that could make a legitimate immediate impact for you in the second round specifically. I don't know if you guys saw what Jalen Royals was doing at the Senior Bowl. I mean, one of the reps was kind of comical because it's also you're not going to get away with that off the line of scrimmage in an actual NFL game where he just bullies the guy and just pushes it back and knocks him to the ground. And that was fun to watch. But there were so many other routes of just him absolutely wrecking people legally and getting ridiculous separation and just being a playmaking weapon for the quarterbacks of the Senior Bowl. And that's, obviously something that we need in general, regardless of the position.
We need playmakers.
And I'm not even saying I want Jalen Royals. I'm just saying, I think what it's shown to me is there are so many players that you can still take on day two at the wide receiver position that can make that impact for you. Trey Harris is another one. Where I would be more okay with trying to go tight end, double down with the offensive playmakers, or even again trading down, getting a defensive lineman, or maybe not even trading down. That's not my number one goal, but there's just so many good wide receivers as well in this draft class that I think you can target that on day two. You don't
pick
have
your poison almost.
Yeah, I mean, as much as again I'd love Egbuka and I would completely want him at pick 20. I would not be mad at that at all. There's so many good guys. It's kind of crazy.
This is a perfect draft for the Broncos.
Lines up in every way.
In every way. Lou, I vividly remember, I want to say it was 2021, and you were going crazy with the fact that they weren't addressing the offensive line, right? They weren't addressing the offensive line. And I think it was the Quinn Miners draft. And they kept trading back. And they weren't taking the offensive line.
Yeah.
Transferred now into 2025. The offensive line is not a position necessarily, as we're kind of winding down the show, that we actually haven't had a chance to talk much about.
Yeah.
But I think that, it's one where it's an underrated need, and this is something
that's a good way to put it.
It's something that Brandon and I have kind of talked a little bit about too on the show, and obviously us in the chat, where it's not a matter of us hating the season that Wattenberg had per se. It's just if he was a bit more consistent of a run blocker, we wouldn't necessarily be having this conversation. But he's a great pass blocker. And and then you have on the flip side of it, Alex Forsyth, who's a great run blocker.
Can we mash them together?
Yeah. So
Alex Wattensythe.
Right. It's so would you, how high of a priority for you, Caden and Lou, would you put the center position? Because I think the way that I would always preface it is that just hypothetically, Ryan Jensen announces he's coming back off of retirement. I am
running to sign him.
I'm running as fast as I can to sign Jensen to have him be the center of the Broncos.
Yeah. So here's the issue with the offensive line. Obviously, Luke Wattenberg, goodness, was an elite pass blocker. He wasn't worth the bottom of my foot as a pass blocker, and my cats are fighting, so you probably hear that. But
they probably agreed with the center.
Yeah, no kidding. The issue with the offensive line as it currently stands is that if we were to pursue a center upgrade in free agency, you'd probably be looking at someone like Drew Dahlman from the Atlanta Falcons. However, Do we want 5 big-time contracts along the offensive line?
Right.
Most teams don't have 3. We might have 5 if we were to pursue that upgrade. So I think the upgrade can look like this. It can look like a tier 3 or tier 4 free agent center for like $1 million, $1.5 million, and you hope that he works. And then maybe a mid to late round center selection in the NFL draft. But if you told me that the offensive line was the same in 2025 as it was in 2024 and Wattenberg was back, I would say awesome. Cool. Because I also think, the running game is going to be a lot better when we have an NFL caliber running back carrying the ball. I don't blame Luke Wattenberg a lot just because he was like a 5th round pick and, he was a fine starting center. But once we get, a legitimate running back, all of a sudden the running game looks good. And all of a sudden we figure out how to run block. And all of a sudden, the center position seems like it's solved. So like I would love a Drew Dahlman or even like a Ryan Kelly for a year, but 5 contracts along the offensive line, I think, even though it's the trenches, I still think it's overblown given we have much more important needs to address.
It was still rather a top 5 unit.
Right. Yeah. But I was listening to the Pat McAfee show today, and obviously they talk about trenches on there and stuff too. But the biggest thing is they were going over, okay, well, how do you, like when you're going to scheme against Philly, you don't necessarily it's really hard to stack the box against them because of how many options they have on the outside between Goddard, Smith, and AJ Brown. But then on the other hand, if you don't stack the box, you've got Saquon Barkley and you've got a bunch of guys having to go one-on-one. He's going to find that seam or he's going to find that lane and he's going to gash you to death. Well, that's my whole thing with this is I'm not telling you that we couldn't try to upgrade the center, but I'm almost agreeing with Lou on this, where I think if we would just upgrade the running back position as a whole, I think you're going to see a better run blocking scheme from our offensive linemen. And I that's why personally for me, if you told me that we had a top 10 pick, I would say that my number 1 guy would be Genty no matter what. But because we don't have that, that's why Ibuka is my guy. Yeah. But I would argue till I'm blue in the face that running back needs to be our number 1 priority this offseason. Yeah. We have got to rebuild that. We have got to rebuild that room because right now as it stands, I'm just going to say it, when it doesn't matter who's in that backfield, maybe Jaleel a little bit, but right now it does not matter who's in that backfield. The defense does not have to take our running game serious. And because of that, they can constantly suck their linebackers back and they can play into coverage. And that's why I think Bo is having to, so many guys say, well, he escapes a clean pocket too often. And it's like, well, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think he's trying to create. And if he gets out of the pocket, maybe he can draw some of those defenders to him, which is going to take them off of his pass receiving catchers in the secondary. And it's because we have no running game at all. So when that's not a threat, you don't have anything crowded up at the line of scrimmage. That's why I just think we need a running back more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think I've kind of mentioned in the chat, Brandon and I, we've had this conversation. It's like, we just kind of go back and forth about like, okay, what's our number 1 needs? A running back, is a tight end, is a wide receiver. And it's funny how like wide receiver is like kind of gone down to now we're running back and it's kind of running back and tight end as far as like, who's that number 1 need in terms of the offense. But you were going to say something as we were talking about that.
The one thing I was going to mention, I couldn't agree more. I don't think that we need to do anything crazy in like free agency at the center position. I think that our running game is really a product of our running backs. Just being blind, to be honest with you.
Blunt.
Shout out Zach Streif, best O-line coach in the NFL.
Zach Streif, we need to give him like a raise already or something.
Lifetime contract.
Big dog.
Ever. It's been absolutely magical. But I would love to see us maybe add some more depth there. And I don't think it needs to specifically be at the center position. I think another guy that really just stood out to me, and unfortunately he's going to stand out to 32 other teams, but at the Senior Bowl that kind of showed that versatility is like someone like Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Dude lined up everywhere on the offensive line and won almost every single rep. He played center, he played guard. That's exactly the kind of guy that I want from this draft. I don't think we need to pay money for someone like that. I want us to draft someone that has that positional versatility to maybe challenge, not challenge, maybe like add some competition to the center room, but just add some more depth to really the entire line and someone that can play multiple positions. I think that's like one of the most valuable picks you can make on the offensive line. It doesn't have to be Zabel. That just is someone that stood out and made me think about it because he was an absolute stud everywhere that he played during the Senior Bowl practices. But that's what I would look to do. I don't think we need to kind of echo what's already been said. We don't need to spend on that position.
Right.
Real quick, Alex mentions, who would you rather have, Watson or Bidet? Still got to get used to saying
the giant meteor.
Bidet.
I think if either back is getting notable carries in 2025, something went wrong.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I think either one of those guys needs to be number 4 on the list. I think if they're any higher than that, we did not do our job in the off season.
Yeah. Well, and I think, if Watson certainly takes a bit of a leap, it's because of the fact that they trust his versatility more. Because I think that, and this is something that, Brandon and I touched on. I think we even mentioned in the chat is like he's a former wide receiver. So he's already got that versatility. But also, Bidet is one where, he's kind of been shafted, if you're being kind of honest with his story. He's been a bit shafted. He had the unfortunate injury when they did give him the opportunity with the Jets game, and they were going to try and, give him some carries, but it certainly seemed like Sean outthought himself in that playoff game, inactivating, Audric Estime and then, having, Bidet start. So, I just think that, it's one where Sean just can't outthink himself. He can't outthink himself. He's got to be able to, get the running backs that he trusts, more importantly.
Well, see, that's the thing with Estime that is so strange. Now, I get he was a rookie. I get that. At the beginning of the year, did he have one? Yeah, did he have 1 or 2 fumbles? I thought it was just 1. Maybe it was 2. And then I remember, I think it was 1, but I remember him saying he walked around all week long carrying a ball, guys trying to, punch it out at the facility and stuff. But it seemed like the fan base was just clamoring for Estime to get touches because we had seen enough of Javonte Williams not being the guy that he was pre-injury. And Estime just never. We would see, a few sequences where Estime would show that he could be something in the running back room. But I almost wonder if Estime's lack of ability in the passing game is why Sean not necessarily refused to use him, but didn't use him as often as he could.
Yeah, maybe. Winding down the show, I know it's early. I know it's the end of January, but if you were sitting right here, I'll give Brandon a pass. We don't necessarily need to do it just now. But Caden and Lou, call your shot right here on January 29th. The Denver Broncos will sign who? We'll start with you, Caden.
Free agency.
Oh boy.
See, this is on the record now. So your Bo Nix prediction that came true. This is on the record now.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm going to go with this guy. He's number 3 on my list. I'm looking at it here on my phone. I'll put this on record. I think Dre Greenlaw will be a Denver Bronco in 2025. I think that is a player that we are going to be able to get at a little bit of a discount because of the injury. San Francisco clearly, unless they find some way to manipulate their situation even further, I don't think there's any way he can be brought back with the rest of the people they still need to pay, not mentioning Brock Purdy. But that is that inside linebacker position, that is a dire need for us. I think he is a leader on defense, and I think he could plug right in And I think that's, if I'm putting my flag in the ground, that's who I'm saying.
Lou?
Nice. This will be my parting piece because it's 11:12 on the East Coast and your boy is sleepy. Juwan Johnson. It won't be a sexy signing, but former Saint, immediate production at tight end, inexpensive, will catch 45 passes for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, it's going to help elevate the room. He'll be cheap, and Juwan Johnson will be a Denver Bronco.
Lou with the ethics
I like
ball.
that.
With the ethics ball of the night. All right. Thank you guys so much for hopping on with us. Before we go, I want you let us know about what you guys got cooking in the predominantly orange oven right now.
Sure. I mean, shoot, I don't even remember what I write half the time. I get like typically 5 to 7 articles a day between predominantly orange and NFL Spin Zone. Always just whatever I can rip off the top of the brain. I do appreciate Broncos Country for reading. Because obviously we can check our page view so I could see how much is being read. But, mock drafts, Senior Bowl stuff is kind of what's been going on, free agency stuff. So kind of angling towards NFL draft and free agency because we're kind of approaching a very active time of the year for NFL content creation, especially.
What about you, Caden? You got something in the predominantly orange oven?
Oh, we're trying to get back into this, having a 5-month-old here at home and kind of going through the winter months here at work has been incredibly busy. But no, once the year starts slowing down a little bit, I'm going to try to jump back in, get some mock drafts, all that good stuff. Really try to attack it. I joined predominantly orange last year in April, and it tends to be with my actual job, I guess, that I go to throughout the day. Once April gets here, it kind of things slow down a little bit, gives me a little bit more time. So, but yeah, I'm going to try to crank out some drafts this year. That was something I didn't do last year because I did it on my own, but I didn't do it for predominantly orange. So yeah, I'm going to try to do a bunch of drafts.
It is that kind of season, and obviously Brandon and I will do a bit more because obviously it is the end of January, and there's obviously much to talk about in terms of the free agency, the rumors, and as Caden and Lou will get you covered, of course, over there on Predominantly Orange as well. Want to remind everybody, hit that subscribe button over there on the MHRT Network page over there on YouTube. As the goal is to try and push for 2,000 by the end of 2025. Make sure you follow Brandon Miller and Lou and, of course, Caden over there on social media. Of course, it's been a phenomenal show. And as always, I want to remind everybody before we go.
Let's go, Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle.